My parents believed a girl's false accusation and hurt my brother. I escaped a toxic home and fought for custody to live with my brother. I, 14M, have wanted to tell this story for a long time. Please be patient as this is a long narrative. I understand it sounds like a lie, but believe me, I want it to be. This has damaged my family, and I am not permitted to discuss it since my parents want to forget what they did. So, just to be safe, I'm sharing this from my friend's brother's Reddit account. My parents had both lost spouses before meeting. My father split from my older sister Lucy's mother, now 25 years old, and my mother lost her ex-husband in a vehicle accident, forcing her to care for my brother, currently 23 years old. They were both single parents with custody of their children. They met on the beach, exchanged numbers, began dating and were married 2 years later. Let's get into the story. It all began when I was 8 years old and my brothers were 17 and 19. My brother Kirby was in his third year of high school and my sister worked at a grocery store near our home. My parents and sister worked, so I stayed with Kirby. It may seem strange, but the best times of my life occurred when Kirby was with me. I understand that many older brothers do not get along with their younger siblings, but this was not the case for us. I loved Kirby with all my heart, and I know he loved me as well. He always looked after me, played with me, studied with me, and occasionally took the blame for me. One day after school, I waited for Kirby in front of my school. He often came to pick me up because our schools were close. But this time was different. He did not arrive. I waited until 4 p.m., when my sister arrived to pick me up. I asked about my brother, but she didn't respond. She simply dodged the conversation. When we got home, I was stunned by the sound of things breaking in the house and my parents' terrified shouts. When we entered the house, the situation could not have been worse. Kirby was on the floor while my father kicked and threw dishes at him, and my mother screamed horrific words at him. I was so terrified that I refused to leave my sister's side. She escorted me upstairs and instructed me not to leave the room till further notice. I remained there, listening and crying. I had never seen my family like that before, and I am still terrified of them, no matter how old I am. Suddenly, I heard sirens. When I peeked out the window, I noticed 2 vehicles and numerous police officers exiting and entering the residence. A short while later, I heard more shouts and the voice of an officer proclaiming an arrest. I witnessed my father and mother being forced into a police van. My parents screamed and cursed at my brother. At 2:04, my parents screamed nasty things at my brother, calling him a disgusting worm who deserved to die. My mother has always agreed. I went downstairs after they were put in the car at 2:10 p.m., and it was terrifying. Lucy was crying on the floor as Kirby held her in his arms. He was thoroughly bloodied and bruised. After that scene, everything was a blur. I only recall being inside an ambulance in the hospital. It was more like a dream, but my sister disagrees, claiming it was a nightmare and the worst day of her life. About 3 days later, my parents were still in jail for assault and attempted murder. So my sister took a few days off to care for me. Finally, I mustered the confidence to ask my sister what had transpired. Lucy, the first person to ever treat me as an adult, told me the truth. Our brother Kirby was accused of rape by a girl in high school. The girl went to the principal, crying and battered, and accused Kirby of abusing her. Our parents and the girl's parents were summoned to school, and the police were also engaged. Kirby explained to our parents that he did not do that, but they refused to listen and instead supported the girl. So when the police stated they would investigate and do tests, Kirby and the daughter were free to return home. Then something happened. My brother is now in the hospital and he is at risk of developing serious physical difficulties as a result of the abuse. The next day, the police summoned my sister to the police station, where she was required to accompany me. But what they told us was alarming, to say the least. Karen appears to be the girl who filed the report. Karen, if you see this, please know that you are the most horrible person I know. I hope you burn in hell, bastard. You have devastated our life. You filed a bogus report since she and Kirby despised each other at school. And after another fight between the two, she injured herself and planned to claim he hit her. However, The plot evolved to a rape in the hopes that she might expel my brother from school. However, she made a mistake and told her pals about it on a video call, causing them to chuckle. What she didn't expect was for everyone to turn against her, with the exception of her best friend, who had been sexually abused as a child and was never believed until lately. Karen's former closest friend went to the police station, told them everything, and managed to videotape some of the conversation. After the piranha confessed, the cops questioned Karen. And for fear of being arrested, she spoke the truth. My sister was pissed off. She wanted to kill Karen at the time, but the police talked her down, telling her that Karen's parents would have to pay a fee for the false charge and defamation. My sister thought it was fine, but not sufficient. When we returned home, our parents were present. And as soon as my sister spotted them, she exploded, shouting about everything that had transpired at the police station. They listened in silence, becoming more startled with each sentence. My mother was already in tears by the time my sister finished, and my body remained paralyzed. Then he did the worst thing. He said, "Are you sure about this?" That was the worst use of words I've ever heard. Lucy delivered a lengthy lecture on how they were awful parents for believing in that circumstance without any proof. And my father tried to rationalize that the girl's words were really valuable. But my sister did not contest it, claiming that without evidence, words were meaningless. I understand that many raped persons are labeled as liars when their allegations are unproven, but this instance is different. Karen lied and fooled everyone for petty reasons. I hope you can understand. My father was defeated and the home was silent for several days. It was not the same without Kirby. He was the soul of the house. He was kind and friendly to practically everyone. He always provided us joy. I still don't understand how my folks were so easily seduced by Karen. I despise them for that, and I will never forgive them for their actions. Kirby awoke after a long time, only to find himself in horrible health. To give you an idea, his jaw was fractured, he lost 60% vision in one eye, his arm and wrist were broken, his ribs were severely wounded, and he narrowly avoided puncturing his lung. His leg was so severely wounded that he would never be able to walk normally again without assistance. It also caused him to experience post-traumatic stress disorder, sadness, and anxiety. My brother was never the same. He is still in serious pain and requires a lot of controlled medicine. He didn't talk for weeks, and when he took out the gadget that held his jaw in place, it didn't change much. He only responded when we asked a question. When he was hungry, he didn't say anything and he frequently burst into tears. I believe it was due to the trauma. I wanted to hug him, but his injuries were so terrible that it was dangerous. My parents tried to visit my brother several times. My mother begged and my father tried to push us to accept them. But my sister prohibited them since she knew my brother didn't want to see our parents. And she told them that, but it wasn't sufficient. My mother was unable to visit him one day due to work, but my parents viewed this as a chance to pay my brother a secret visit. I believe their thoughts would be something like this. Let's go see our son, apologize, he accepts, we'll be fine, and we'll be one big happy family again. What a big mistake. As soon as they entered the room, my brother let out the biggest scream I'd ever heard from him. Soon, physicians and nurses entered the room to try to calm my brother down. He commanded, "Get them out of here. They're murderers. They have come to kill me. Please take them out of here," Kirby yelled out, and then fainted out from tension. Of course, following that, my parents were banned and barred from visiting Kirby. Only my sister and I were allowed to see him. My mother sobbed all night and my father blamed our brother, claiming he was exaggerating. Kirby was released from the hospital after months of physical and mental recuperation. My parents had the guts to invite him home. However, Kirby replied, "I would not return to this house even if it were the last location on earth. I am now motherless. I hope you both pay for what you've done to me." Kirby moved to live with his paternal grandparents, who had no idea of the circumstances before then. They took preventive precautions against our parents. He welcomed my sister and me to visit him at any time, and we did. In fact, I spent more time with him than my parents at home. The final straw came during a family party, when we discovered that my father had lied to our entire family. He informed them that Kirby had dropped out of school to live in a drug-infested environment and had fled home, taking his belongings and the money they were saving for my college. But my parents didn't earn that money. Kirby and Lucy were the ones who raised it for my tuition. Kirby had done several odd jobs and was now saving because he believed I deserved a better future. My sister and I were furious. We informed our family the whole truth and they were startled and unhappy with our parents. My paternal grandparents were the only ones who supported my parents, saying, "It's human to err," and that they had done nothing wrong. They claimed my parents were simply ashamed of their deeds. But no one else agreed. The rest of the family left my parents and proceeded to apologize to Kirby. Fun fact: the next day, Kirby contacted me, perplexed. He wondered why folks he hadn't spoken with in months suddenly came to apologize to him. Karen's parents arrived at our home a year after the incident occurred. They inquired whether Kirby was home, and when we responded no, they apologized for what had transpired before leaving. Later I learned that they had come to offer Kirby compensation, giving him all of the money intended for Karen's college and automobile. My brother thanked them but stated, "I haven't forgiven Karen and never will. If she ever appears in front of me, I'll tell her some unpleasant realities." Karen's parents accepted his statement and departed. My older brother is doing much better right now, although he is still not completely cured. He still has nightmares about that day, which regularly trigger anxiety attacks. Someone should go to him and calm him down. I want to be there for him, help him, and get away from the toxic world we live in. That is why I have opted to move in with Kirby initially. I spoke with my brother. He was hesitant at first, but eventually accepted the idea and told his grandparents, who consented. I also chatted with Lucy, who felt it was an excellent idea. However, when I spoke with my parents, the tale was completely different. My mother burst into tears, and my father got hysterical, claiming that everyone had already abandoned them and that his youngest son would do the same. I became upset and informed him that I had already abandoned him that fateful afternoon and that he would never accept me back. My father, a guy in his 50s who had always said that sobbing was for sissies, began wailing like a baby. He explained that he had already lost everything and did not want to lose me as well. I couldn't bear the situation, so I left the house and went to a friend's house to vent. My friend admonished me, telling me that I shouldn't forsake my parents like that. His older brother, Steve, the creator of this Reddit account, interfered and begged him to quiet up, claiming he knew nothing. Steve informed me his brother had a poor mind and pushed me to seek further viewpoints. He introduced me to Reddit and suggested that I post my question here. So gentlemen, what should I do? Update 1. Well, a lot has happened since my initial post here. I had a question, but I'd like to thank everyone for helping me make up my mind. Thank you so much for your encouraging words, and thank you to Steve, the owner of this account, for his support as well. Let's get started. I ended up fleeing my home since my parents banned me from leaving. I waited until they went together to go shopping, something they frequently did without me because they treated me like a child and assumed I'd just beg them to purchase stuff. However, this time, they pushed me to join them, which threw off my plans. I opted to pack the essentials in a backpack, along with some snacks to keep me going. As soon as we were to the market, I wanted to use the restroom. Fortunately, my parents were so preoccupied with how the price of food had risen that my father simply instructed me to leave and return shortly. Plot twist: I did not come back. I dashed out of the market and boarded the bus closest to Kirby's grandparents' home. When I arrived, Kirby's grandma welcomed me and encouraged me to relax while I waited for Kirby and his grandfather to return home. When they arrived, I informed them what had transpired, including what I had posted on Reddit. My brother's reaction was not what I was expecting. He stated it was highly irresponsible of me to flee, that it was risky, and that something terrible could have happened. It may sound strange, but I enjoy it when he scolds me. Unlike our parents, he genuinely cares about me. I could be gone for 3 days and they would not notice. In truth, it had happened previously. They simply became enraged when they discovered this. I took the scolding well and asked if I could stay. My sibling commented, You will come back here even if I send you back to their house, so you better stay." I was overjoyed and hugged him. His grandparents were likewise thrilled with my brother's decision, but my elation faded when he said that I would have to contact my parents. I resisted, knowing they would come for me, but my brother insisted, saying, "They are responsible for you. And if you don't tell them, they can call the police and claim that I kidnapped you and am holding you hostage." I hesitantly called my mother. She barely responded before she began yelling at me and asked where I was. When I told her, they became even angrier, ranting in such a harsh alien tone that everyone around me could hear. I could have stood there and listened to them yell, but I hung up when I noticed Kirby was becoming uncomfortable. Following the aggression, he developed a sensitivity to yelling. He cursed his parents for what they had done to him. I became enraged and threatened to take me by force, but my brother responded, "They are aggressive but not idiots. They are aware that I have a protective order against them. If they approach, we'll call the cops." How mistaken he was. An hour and a half later, they were knocking on the front door, yelling and screaming at my brother for future generations. Kirby's grandparents urged them to leave or they'd contact the cops. This simply made them angry, so they returned to hammering on the door. I wanted to walk down and tell them to go, but Kirby needed me. I had to pull him back because he wanted to confront them and express his fury in person. He harbors a lot of resentment towards them. He even stated once that he intended to kill them slowly and horribly. I agree with the sentiment, but I do not believe he should get his hands filthy with them. Then they burst down the door and began wrecking the house in search of me. At that point, I decided to go downstairs and dismiss them. I was trying to calm my brother down by asking him to stay in the room while I handled the problem. My mother let out the greatest scream I'd ever heard, and my father went silent. After persuading my brother to remain in the room, I went downstairs, and the situation could not have been more gloomy. My father was sprawled on the floor, shivering, while my mother stood over him, screaming and calling out to him in vain. I noticed that Kirby's grandfather was clutching a taser. I believe we all know what occurred, right? When my mother saw me, she screamed, "Look what they did to your father! Call the police! They should be arrested." I replied that if I called the police, she and my father would be arrested for violating the protective order. She ignored me and kept screaming, insisting that we call an ambulance for my father. We disregarded her, suggesting that once my father healed they should leave and never return. When my father finally returned to his senses, he was unusually silent, defeated and beaten. My brother quickly appeared downstairs. My mother instantly assaulted him verbally, resulting in a heated argument. She began blaming him for everything, claiming he was the reason all of our family had abandoned her and that her children had turned their backs on her. She blamed herself, claiming that she was an innocent woman who went to church every Sunday and did not deserve to go through this. I'm not sure what she meant by it. Nobody would feel sorry for her simply because of that. Kirby remained mute throughout her screaming crises, but she eventually crossed the line. She stated that he was meant to apologize to them for destroying their lives and inform everyone in the family that he had forgiven them. That was the limit. Kirby, furious, slapped her so hard that she tumbled on the ground. My mother began screaming again, but Kirby told her to stop or he would crush her teeth with the base of the cane. He screamed, letting out everything he'd been holding in for years, how unhappy they were, how they dug their own graves, and how they didn't deserve anyone around them. He further stated that when they died, he would make a point of peeing on their coffins. My mother became enraged and attempted to punch Kirby, but I shoved her against the wall. She began ranting at me as well, claiming I would go to hell for abandoning her and referring to me as a dirty lesbian who would also go to hell. For perspective, I am bisexual, and I made the mistake of informing my parents. Surprisingly, my father was fine with it, but my mother was furious, claiming I was destined and even forbidding me to be bisexual. She introduced me to her church friends' daughters, which made them uneasy. The strange thing is, when I told my brother, he just remarked, "So, you give me a nephew? Let's stay cool." My brother then began demanding them to leave and pay for the damage they had done to the house, or we would file a complaint. My mother laughed, stating that I wouldn't have the bravery to report my own mother. I replied, What I have most is courage, and I would have the satisfaction of seeing you arrested again. She made excuses, claiming we didn't have proof, but my brother shut her down, pointing out that we had fingerprints, video evidence, and even footage from security cameras. It took her a long time to accept defeat, but they eventually left. But my brother wanted to add one more jab. As my mother entered the car, Kirby exclaimed, "Hey, I wish you could have died in my father's place." In response, she flashed him the middle finger and screamed as she climbed into the car, making my brother laugh, a triumph laugh, as if he had just won a long round of his favorite video game. Soon later, our sister called to say our mother had informed her she had been assaulted by Kirby and needed to bring me home to fix me. My sister, on the other hand, expressed her pride in me for standing up to them and joked that Kirby should have broken the cane over their heads. Now I'm living with my brother, as I've always desired, and it's been amazing. He's determined to acquire custody of me and has threatened our parents to give it to him in any manner. My mother is resolute, stating that she will not leave me with an abuser. She presumably thinks I am bisexual because my brother molested me. How crazy is that? I believe it is only a matter of waiting for her to succumb. For the time being, everything appears to be proceeding as planned. I had a passionate talk with my brother before he fell asleep. He was thinking about what life might be like if his father was still living. I informed him that his life could have been a little better. But he said, maybe. Maybe not. If he hadn't died, I might not have experienced the aggression, but I wouldn't have my two angels in my life. Then he kissed my forehead. I must confess, that was very lovely. I hugged him. I adore him, and I am confident that we will always defend each other. Thank you to everyone who has supported me. I hope nobody has to go through what we did. For those who feel our narrative is untrue, I wish it were. I wanted us to be a good family that accepts and protects one another regardless of the circumstances. However, this can only occur in my dreams. See you folks, maybe I'll update with the outcome of the procedure, so see you then. Update 2. Hello everyone, thank you very much for your support. Believe me, I am fine, and my brother is better, but fine is insufficient for him. He wants my custody at any means and is pursuing my parents with everything he has. Well, I wouldn't be here just to say we're fine, so let's get to the point. We were enjoying a peaceful afternoon when there was a knock on the door, which had already been repaired by a friend of Kirby's grandfather. I went to answer it, but was astonished to see my father present. I immediately sent him away, but he said that he simply wanted to communicate and didn't want to make a fuss. I told him to **** off and that we would only communicate in court. However, my father insisted and Kirby's grandparents threatened to contact the police. To our amazement, Kirby said to let him in. We questioned him, but Kirby simply stated that my father was a pushy moron who would not go easily, so it was best to allow him in and get it over with. So we let him in, but we were prepared in case he became aggressive. Kirby sat at the kitchen table and we all remained in the kitchen for protection. Kirby's grandmother was recording the conversation to provide additional evidence that my father was violating the provisional measure. The conversation went as follows. Kirby responded, "Very brave of you to come back here after all you've done. My dad. I'm sorry, I swear I'll pay for all the damage." Kirby. Pay? Of course you believe you can solve anything with money, correct? But I am not talking about tangible stuff, which are replaceable. What you accomplished for me was priceless. Father. I know. I apologize. I promise I will give my life to travel back in time. I do everything differently. Kirby. Yeah, but you can't travel back in time. The damage is already done. You devastated me. You destroyed your family. Father. But there was an accident. If you had told us from the start, things may have been different. Kirby says, more lies. You did not want to listen to me. Do you understand what you did to me? You made me feel unworthy of living. You've made me want to die. Do you have any concept of how that feels? No, because you are the aggressor, and the aggressor will never feel the victim's terror. Son of a b***********. Kirby began to cry at that point, but it was a cry of wrath and bitterness that he had suppressed for many years. My father continued to apologize in vain, but my brother claimed that his sole motivation was to feel better about himself, not to sincerely regret what he had done. However, my father continued to apologize, to the point where my brother issued his ultimatum, despite the fact that he was on the verge of another anxiety attack. Kirby asks, "Do you want forgiveness? Here's what we plan to do. You are going to grant me custody of my brother. You'll pay his child support, and you'll never try to get close to me, him, or anybody else again. Or else I will make your days a miserable hell." My father agreed immediately. I'll tell you, I don't feel sorry for him, but I've never seen him so defeated as he was at that point. I believe the shock of his deeds finally hit him hard, but I feel no sympathy for him. He deserves it. He deserves to feel the pain he has caused our family. He left shortly after, stating he was going to try to persuade my mother to relinquish custody of me. He too appealed for forgiveness, but I simply ignored him. My brother burst into tears the moment he went out the door. I believe his courage had gone at that point. He began crying and collapsed to his knees on the floor, hyperventilating and sweating cold. We escorted him into his room so he could lie down. We offered him anxiety medication, but it didn't seem to help. I contacted my sister and explained all that had transpired. She arrived instantly, and we all remained in the room, attempting to calm him down. My sister repeatedly told my brother that he was one of the bravest persons she knew. Despite his anxiety, he was brave enough to remain in the same room with our father, his abuser, and, as he called it, his murderer. After several hours, my brother finally calmed down and fell asleep. Lucy and I slept in his room just in case he had nightmares afterwards. But of course, nothing can end like that. My mother called us many hours later, inquiring what that demon Kirby had done to her husband. She accused my brother of having captivated her sweet hubby, and claimed he now wanted to give everything to Kirby. My sister simply ordered her to **** off, noting that at least one of them had come to their senses. So I hope everything works out and my mother finally comes to her senses and does the right thing. Thank you so much for everyone's support, especially Steve, who owns this account and has always been there for me since I first told my tale. While I'm gone, I'll give updates if anything changes. See you later. If you're asking why I use phony identities, it's to preserve my brother's privacy. I do not want their life to be invaded. Update 3. Hello everyone, it's been a while. You deserve the most recent update and I can say I'm overjoyed that it's finally finished. It's truly over. I'm free of that place and those people. In my last report, I said that my mother did not want to give up custody of me. My father threatened her in every way imaginable, but she did not care. She stated that she would never abandon me and would go to any length to reclaim my trust. So since she wouldn't give in, we turned to psychological pressure. We told everyone in our family what had transpired and how my brother wanted custody of me. The relatives knew, and they attacked my mother directly, claiming that it was the least she and my father could do to make amends for the past. However, my mother barred all of our relatives, claiming that my brother had charmed them. Typical. A week after I moved in with Kirby, she called. Karen stated, "I'll give you two options. You're going to come home without complaining and we'll forget all this, or you're going to stay there and suffer the consequences." I refused to succumb to her demands. I informed her that even if my brother died, he would not return to that house. So she hung up with me. I called to inform Kirby because I was concerned that she would do something damaging to him. He assured me not to worry, and that if anything happened he'd notify me. Then it occurred. The police knocked on our neighbor's door, an older lady who is quite nice. The police were summoned in response to an alleged accusation of child abuse at our residence. However, when they learned they were in the incorrect residence, they hurriedly left. I pulled things together. My mother had phoned the cops. But she's gone so far that she misplaced our address, directing the police to the wrong residence. Hours later, my mother called to suggest she could withdraw the complaint provided I went home without a fuss. Of course, I told her to go to hell and hung up. My brother apologized to the neighbor for what transpired. Then he decided that since my mother wanted to play dirty, we should play dirty too. We utilized our final weapon, our maternal grandma, the person my mother despises more than my brother. It was tough to get her contact information since, sadly, our grandma despises me and my sister for reasons we cannot control. It was tough to get her contact information since, sadly, our grandma despises me and my sister just because we are our father's children. Yes, she is the traditional grandma who has a favorite grandson, in our case Kirby, which provided us an unfair advantage. We eventually discovered her after searching for her phone number or address. So my brother called her and told her about everything, from the assault to our current situation. When asked if she could help my brother, Grandma's sole response was that she would be here as quickly as possible. And believe me, she arrived in our city an hour and 30 minutes later, which was okay because my brother had simply asked her to call my mother. And she agreed to the bargain and went straight to my parents' place for a surprise visit, which my mother absolutely despises. She called me and Lucy and asked if my brother had anything to do with it, which we disregarded. Her reaction was even enjoyable. Our grandma was purposefully driving our parents insane, and they couldn't fight back because, as I know, my mother is greedy, and my grandmother owns a large plot of property that, if sold, could provide for someone for a long time. That's true, my parents are not only fools and psychopaths, but also greedy. I believe my brother must have married into the wrong family since it is simply inconceivable. And after 2 weeks of misery for our parents, my mother finally asks when she'll leave. She stated that she would only go if my mother relinquished custody of me, with which my mother disagreed. She wanted our grandmother to depart, so she played the final card. Either my mother would relinquish custody of me, or she was entirely out of will, son and money. Guess which one won? So we went to court, and if looks could kill, my parents would have already been buried. The judge became agitated as he recounted the events of the past, wondering how my parents escaped justice so easily. Unfortunately, in today's world, money is more valuable than a person's sins. My father even hid his face, but my mother was there, unconcerned, convinced that she had done nothing wrong. I believe the most stressful moment was when Kirby and my mother confronted each other. Believe me, if you were there and seen the stares they gave each other, it was scary. I sometimes forget that these two once lived together. My mother may appear regular and friendly, but she is deceptive and manipulative. If you do or say something she disagrees with, you are perceived as a threat and heavily reprimanded for it. My brother, on the other hand, is so open-minded that it nearly scares me. He can make friends with just about anyone. If you see a young man with a cane and smiling and waving, it's probably my brother. So why can't I grasp how these two contradicting beings share the same body? Returning to the process, it was both complicated and speedy. After all, my parents were unwilling to fight for me, so our lawyer reached an agreement in which I would live with my brother and my parents would be required to pay a very significant alimony. My mother questioned why they had to pay child support since I was now my brother's responsibility, but my father and grandmother advised her to shut up and accept the deal. We eventually obtained it after a long and stressful process. Now I can live with my brother and they will have no control over me. I erased my parents' contact information exactly 30 minutes after receiving the results. I don't need it anymore. They will now become a part of the past that I would like to forget. But wait. There's more. Our granny had an epiphany before she went. My mother had never been mentioned in the will. Our grandmother took her away soon after she married my father. It was even funnier. She essentially swapped it for something she'll never have. My brother is the only person mentioned in her will, which is fantastic in my opinion. Our brother Kirby got all he wanted and deserved. I'm not sure if I call it divine justice or whatever, but he deserved it, and we couldn't be happier about it. I'd like to thank everyone on Reddit and the owner of this account. I'm glad you helped and guided me during this difficult time in my life. And now there's a happy ending. Even more personally, I hope I won't have to return here until absolutely necessary.
That's it for today's stories. If you enjoyed these, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Have a crazy story of your own? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching Redditary, and I'll see you in the next one.